The rest of our members across Canada, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. have been incredibly impressed with what each and every one of you have accomplished here in this state in the past 2 years. Because every time we hear they beat it back again, people are like shocked. Because nowhere else in the country does any other local union have to count, you all have to count, in order to prevail. So you humble the Californians and the New Yorkers who think they've got big state legislatures, but nobody, as you know, compares to New Hampshire. So you should give yourselves a round of applause because you've done an amazing job in resistance. And the thing that I'm clear about is that that cannot happen without the dedication and sacrifice of each and every person in this room. That it has taken you getting yourselves and your coworkers engaged in making a case to the rest of the people of this state about what kind of state you want to be. I saw a sign that said, New Hampshire can do better, as an example in the protests. And I know that you had to stand up and make the case for why the path that the legislature wants to take you on has to be rejected by the majority of the people of this state, and that you want to make sure that good middle-class jobs and our vision and values for this country are the ones that prevail. And so I bring you gratitude from the rest of our members because your resistance here helps stem the tide in other places around the country. And I know that that resistance is not possible without a leader. And so let me just give a shout out to your president, Diana Lacey, who has made an incredible difference. At the national table, I think she and I came to office at about the same time. I think I got in two months before you. And then Diana joined the International Executive Board in the third meeting that I was chairing as president of the International Union. And I have to tell you, I was so impressed the first time we opened the conversation, and this woman stuck her hand right up in the air. And for a lot of people, it's kind of an intimidating room, because it's 77 people sitting around a big open square with microphones, and sometimes I can barely see across the room to who's raised their hand, and she never, ever gives up a chance to represent your concerns and your hopes and dreams for the way things ought to be in the future. And it's a huge contribution to the national debate. But my job here tonight with you is to talk about the 2012-2016 vision. And I thought I would do that by explaining that over the course of the last 2 years, what we've done is tried to take stock of the attack that is occurring throughout this country on working families. And I would submit that what we did as a union was examine, when I took office in May of 2010 and then chaired a June 2010 executive board meeting, we examined the increasing attack on public employees in this country and the erosion of the standard that everybody should be able to retire with dignity in this country. And when we looked at how the attack was mounting on the public service members in our union, we compared it to the inability that we had to continue to organize in the private sector on scale and the erosion of private sector wages and benefits that have happened over the last 30 years, given the intersection of government policy that has allowed for the destruction of worker organization in the private sector and multinational corporation decisions to take manufacturing out of our country and offshore it overseas. And the confluence of those policies and multinational decisions together has eroded a standard of living in this country, so that most people in the private sector's annual salary is now $24,000 a year. And 80% of us in this country are sharing 25% of the wealth that we generate. And 20% are sharing 80% of the wealth that's generated in this country. And that imbalance is what's causing the pressure in this state and across the country And I'm proud to say that our union, together with the rest of the labor movement and any justice organization, has said enough is enough. That we have to stand up for our way of life in this country, that we want to restore the ability for people to work one good job, not three, one good job where you can support a family, expect to have guaranteed health care and an ability to retire, and also expect that your children or our next generation are going to do better than we've done. And that basic package is threatened in our economy now, and nobody in our economy believes they will either stay in the middle class or get into the middle class, whichever it is, right? And that we have taken upon ourselves to think about the next 4 years, about how do we use every resource in our organization to help create the conditions for a turnaround in this country that will change the balance of power and allow us all to share in the prosperity that we generate in this country. Because you and I both know this is not an issue of scarcity. This is not a question of our economy not generating the kind of wealth that can be shared. It's a question of our government policy and corporate behavior reinforcing each other to keep the 1% in place. So what we think we have to do in the next 4 years is make the case that this income inequality is the #1 problem that our nation has to solve, and that we have to keep escalating the debate on how this inequality is not necessary, and that there's plenty of things that both the private sector and our elected officials can do that will tip the balance of power for all working families in this country. And we think that the next 8 months, as we prepare for the 2012 election, is the way for us to make a case about who stands with the 99% versus the 1%, which I find, I don't know if you agree, is just a very easy shorthand way to describe how this imbalance needs to get corrected in this country. So we would like to make the 2012 election a mandate for change on behalf of the 99%, and make the re-election of our President, Barack Obama, and all the other elected officials that our members endorse, hold those elected officials for making change occur once they get into office. So we think we have to create an independent outside force, like you've done here in New Hampshire with the Unity Table, that keeps the heat on 2013 and beyond, so that we can get 15 million people back to work when the Bush tax cuts expire this December. This is not a pipe dream. It's completely possible that $4 trillion in tax cuts can get reinvested in government and reinvested in people, and we can get our economy going again by getting America back to work. It's a very simple thing. And I have to tell you, I have started a house called the Senate and the White House, and we are responsible for creating the demand that will make that unequivocal. That we don't need to spend down the debt in the first 2 years. We need to get people back to work so that we can then responsibly pay down our debt, but once we can get the suffering addressed in this country. So that's kind of the arc of the work, but it's rooted in this notion that what we want to do as a union is not simply fight back, not simply fend off the bad things, but we want to turn things around so that we can begin to argue for the kind of country that you and I, some of us had the privilege of growing up in, and others of us might have been excluded from but deserve it in this next generation. Because when I think about my own life experience, I was blessed to be born into a middle-class family where my mom was a teacher, my dad was a salesman. I was brought up to believe that I could do anything in this country. I consider that a blessing, because I don't believe that's true for every child in our country any longer. But I was also born into a family of 10 children, where I was the oldest girl. So it wasn't like a lot was handed to me. I had to work hard for it, and I always was taught the lesson that hard work was how I was going to get ahead. And so those two values, which is about believing that anything is courageous, whether people object to the treatment of a coworker, whether somebody fights for an absenteeism policy that makes it fair for everybody in their department. There's lots of ways in which people lead in our union every day. But the thing I hold in my heart whenever I speak publicly for our union is what it takes for a non-union worker to decide to stick their neck out and form an organization like the adjunct faculty did in this union just a short time ago. Because these are not times when workers are encouraged to form organizations to lift their wages or improve their standards. And that's what I think we have to recreate in our country in order to turn things around. We have to be a union that is about making the case that unions can be part of the solution to income inequality, and that millions of private sector workers being able to lift wages is going to take the pressure off public service workers and restore the ability for everybody to retire with dignity in this country. And that's what we want to be about as a union as we head into these next 4 years. And the two key ingredients that have emerged from our member conversations to make this possible is that we have to get members involved in making this change on a scale that we've never done before in SEIU. And the second thing is we have to be willing to partner with faith-based organizations, labor organizations, immigrant rights organizations, LGBT, civil rights organizations in a way that we've never imagined before. And that those two things combined will create the conditions for us to shift this balance of power and be able to recreate a strong and vibrant middle class in this economy where everybody is treated with dignity and respect they deserve, where every family has the opportunity to enjoy life, not just work themselves to death, which a lot of families are doing right now, and that we can look at our children and grandchildren and expect that they're going to do better than we've done. And that's the sort of three core elements that guide our union's thinking in the next 4 years. And so I think, Diana, that's what you wanted me to help frame in this conversation. And let me just say that in conclusion, the other conversation I'm trying to start as we prepare for the convention in 12 weeks is if this is the moment that you agree that we can turn things around in terms of the direction of this country, then I think three things are required of us as leaders that I've not yet experienced across the hundreds of thousands of leaders in SEIU, and that I want to call upon people to do as we go to Denver. One is I think we have to have a shared unity of purpose like we've never had before inside our organization. I think we have to be single-minded about that this is our moment, that we're not going to give up, enough is enough, and that we can turn things around for all working people in this country. And the second thing is I think we have to be willing to learn and ask questions as we try and do something that's not been done in our generation. Millions of workers have not formed unions in our generation. We've been in a generation where the labor movement has been slowly declining from 30% when I was born in 1957 to now where 11% of the workers in this economy collectively bargain their wages, right? And then the third thing I think we have to do is have the courage to decide and act. You know this as well as I do because of what you've been fighting here. We have to be willing to make the case, in spite of the attack on public employees, in spite of the attack on unions in general, to say to the rest of our friends, co-workers, neighbors, for me, the national press, that unions are a key ingredient to solving income inequality. And when 30% of the workers in this economy were collectively bargaining, wages were rising for everyone. It wasn't just union workers' wages that were rising, right? And wages kept up with productivity. And now productivity has been increasing and wages have been declining. And that we have an obligation to make the case to all people in this country that we can help be a key ingredient to economic prosperity for all Americans. So I look forward to making that happen with each and every one of you. Thanks very much.